everyone, it's Duncan here, and today we're back with HeadRush to see if we can recreate John Mayer's iconic guitar tone using the Revalver 5 plugin. Right, so to get started, we're going to be taking a look at the Last Train home track of John Mayer's latest album, Sob Rock, and how close we can get to replicating that rhythm and lead guitar tone. My main reason for picking this track in particular is because I believe John Mayer's captured a perfect blend of retro and modern guitar tones, and it's also something that we're starting to see in a lot of music nowadays. It also uses a lot of chorus and modulation effects, which I thought would be a good testing ground for the Revalver 5 plugin and see how well it could handle it. Plus, we can clearly hear from the track that John Mayer uses a lot of boutique amplifiers, so it'll be fun to see if we can replicate that sound with a guitar plugin. So first off, let's take a look at dissecting the rhythm tone, which is featured in the chordal sequence in the main track. This rhythm tone is really quite prominent across the balance of the track. It cuts through all the other instruments perfectly, but also carries that clarity of the guitar with it. To really achieve this tone before any amps and effects, what we're going to need is we're going to need a position 4 on any Strat or S-type guitar. And yes, that does mean that you don't need a Silver Sky to replicate this tone. But really, any position 4 on an S-type guitar will do. So before jumping into actually dissecting the guitar tone and looking at the plugin, it's going to be important to know what amps John Mayer was actually using on that Last Train home record. So although John Mayer does have one of the greatest gear collections going, and yes, there's no documentary saying how he got this exact guitar tone online, we can see through live videos, music videos, and a couple of forums as well, that to get the foundation of this tone, he was using a Soldano snakeskin and a 2-rock combination. Whether or not this is 100% true, we'll never know, of course, without asking John Mayer himself. But what I will be doing is I'll be following that kind of amplifier setup to get the foundation of my tone in this video. So now that I've opened up a fresh version of Revalver 5 and loaded up my preset patch for the Last Train home, we're going to take a look at the foundation of the tone, which is of course the Soldano amplifier. To find the Soldano amplifier, all you have to do is head on to the amplifier window here, scroll down, and there should be two versions of the Soldano amplifier on Revalver 5. We've got the SLO 100 3-channel, and we've got an SLO 100 with an extended range. Both of them are based off a 1989 Soldano 100. Cab-wise, I had to play around with a lot of different alternatives on Revalver 5, and I ended up finding Doc's Best 2x12, which I thought carried enough warmth, but then clarity that the guitar didn't get lost in any of the mix. Settings wise, it was quite an interesting one. I had to play around quite a bit to get that tone right, but basically I started off with the clean channel on the SLO 100, and in terms of the preamp volume and an overdrive on there, I kind of pushed it just a little bit to give that kind of boutique amplifier setup, but not enough that it was going into any kind of full gain stage. EQ wise, I kept everything fairly standard. I mean, what I did is I boosted the treble just a little bit and presence just to bring once again that clarity from that position 4 on the Strat. I rolled off the mids a little bit and then also rolled off the bass, which just kind of cleaned up some of the muddiness that this amplifier and also I think the cabinet combination was providing. All in all, this is what the riff should sound like with just the SLO 100 turned on. Next, if we take a look at what's going on in front of the amplifier, I've got a couple of simple but effective pedals that are bringing out the nuances in my playing, but also the pick noise and the clarity in that position 4. I've also chosen to replicate some of the pedals that we know John Mayer uses, which we'll see in a second. So first up, I've got a compressor. This is the grey comp, which I've got on here. What I'm doing here is I've kind of boosted the level a little bit, rolled off the sustain. This is a very subtle pedal which I've got on. It's mainly to get the articulation of that pick noise from position 4 and also to kind of boost the general rhythm signal before it hits the amplifier, providing like a really solid foundation for a rhythm guitar tone. It's also worth mentioning that by having a compressor setup like this for your rhythm guitar tone, it's going to let all of the transients of those chord hits come through and then also kind of boost the overall signal for your tone. Next in the signal chain, I've got this K drive, which I think there's no guessing of what this pedal is trying to replicate. This was ultimately used to drive a little bit more signal into the front end of the amplifier, but also I wanted it to colorize the overall tone of our rhythm sound. The Klon has a very distinctive sound, and it's a huge staple in a lot of John Mayer style riffs, so it had to be our overdrive of choice when setting this rig up. Settings wise, everything is kept fairly simple on this. I'm a big believer of making micro changes and then stacking them up when you are creating any kind of preset like this. So for drive, I've got it about a quarter, tones just a little bit past 12 o'clock, and levels just behind at about 11 o'clock on that. All in all, this is what the riff should sound like with the pedals on the front end and the Soldano turned on. Lastly, and probably one of the most important effects when recreating this tone, is going to be chorus. For this I use the Dyna multi-chorus, which is modeled off the Avid Technology multi-chorus plugin. Settings wise, the aim was to get a subtle but overall colorization from the chorus using the rate and depth control as seen here. This took a lot of playing around, but I managed to get it quite close from what I could hear replicating the track. And then the next control which really kind of helped out with that was this width control over here. My main objective was to get it as wide sounding as possible. I really wanted a really good stereo width of field when recording this track. I did track 2 guitars left and right just to extend that stereo width. As this was a rhythm tone, there was really no need for any delay or reverb, so I kept the overall tone quite dry in terms of the space for this. So with everything turned on, this is generally what the rhythm tone should sound like. So that's generally all the settings I had for the rhythm tone of the Last Train Home guitar riff. There will be a preset patch in the description below for this, so download it, have a play. You might need to tweak some EQ settings depending on the guitar that you're using, but this should get you roughly in that ballpark. Okay, so the solo tone in this track is definitely a lot more emphasized in regards to modulation effects and reverbs and delays. So here's how the solo sounds in context of the full track. Okay, so opening up our preset patch, we will start with the amplifier like we did before, and for this one I'm using the same amplifier. It's the Soldano SLR 100, but the main difference here is I'm using the crunch channel, which you can see on screen. EQ settings have been changed quite a bit compared to our rhythm tone, so what you can see here is the treble has been pulled back quite a lot. This was mainly because when we went to the crunch channel, the extra gain stage just ended up pushing too many kind of highs in there, so I had to roll that back a little bit, and then I did that as well with the presence control there. Mids I boosted quite a bit on this tone. This was to allow the solo to really cut through the mix the way I wanted it to, and the bass had been left fairly standard to where it was before. The actual kind of like our preamp section along with our kind of master section, I pushed the overdrive and preamp just a little bit, but basically what I wanted was nothing too drastic, but just a solid foundation of a gain stage that our drive pedals could cling onto. So this is what the solo tone sounds like when we only have the amplifier on. So next, let's take a look in front of the amplifier. What we've got here is the compressors left exactly the same as I had in the rhythm tone, but the main difference is our Klon. The drive and level control have been pushed quite a bit compared to the rhythm tone. What I've done here is adjusted it just enough that it allowed all the clarity of the guitar still to come through, but giving me a nice saturated tone that helped with sustain and also just sounded really pleasant on the ears. There's definitely a fine balance when it comes to drive pedals. It's one of those things that it can really destroy your tone if you go too much, so what I did is just less is more, and we can always add more later on. Here's what the tone should sound like when we just have the pedals and the amplifier on. Lastly, we have modulation effects. Now this window is definitely quite different compared to our rhythm tone, so let's take a quick look. In terms of the chorus, I've left the depth and the rate the same as what is found on our rhythm tone, but I've definitely played around with that mix control to bring more of that emphasis on the chorus through our solo tone. Width, once again, is left really full on this because I wanted the widest stereo field that we could out of our chorus. Next in the signal chain, I added an 8-band EQ. This was just to kind of tighten up any tone which I was hearing from our amplifier. So as you can see, I rolled off a little bit of the bass end in this. I boosted a bit of the mids and also adjusted just the highs a little bit, just for that clarity again and making it really kind of stand out in the mix. Next, we've got delay and reverb. So the first one is the air delay. Now this is modeled off the Pro Tools plugin, and for this I've kind of done a 468 millisecond delay. And then I really kind of played around with the feedback and the mix. The mix is really low, it's just at 5%, but it's basically enough that you can hear it when you play 1 or 2 notes, and then it cuts away nice. So once again, keeping that clarity for the whole guitar tone on there. Then obviously this goes into our reverb here, so I've got a sampled hall on here, and once again the wet is kept really low. We've got minus 25 dB on here, so this is just making sure that we've got a nice ambient texture in the background, but nothing that's going to crowd our overall solo tone. With all the effects on, this is what the solo should sound like. So there we have it. That's a quick rundown of how I achieved the rhythm and lead guitar tones for Last Train Home using the Revalver 5 plugin from HeadRush. These are always fun videos for me to create, and also they utilize all the features found in the Revalver 5 plugin. If you want to have a go yourself, then you can download the free version of Revalver 5 in the description below. I've also created the preset patches for this tone, so you can download those, adjust the EQ with your guitar, and have a play yourself, see what you can do with those. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We've got plenty more of these challenges up on the way. I've been Duncan, and as always, I'll see you all in the next one.